Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. This is episode number 3. I'm Jersey Rick, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Hi.
How's everybody doing here? This is our 3rd episode for January of 2025, and this is a follow-on from episode number 2, was called The Furnace of Leadership Development Reflection. Today's episode is the Furnace of Leadership Development. So, with, with that being said, Emily, let's go ahead and jump right on into this episode.
Yeah, so like you said, we're going to be talking about your book, The Furnace of Leadership Development, and specifically the chapter that talks about the temperature has to be just right. So in episode 2, we already talked about reflecting in 2024. So if you haven't listened to that episode, we encourage you to just go back and listen to it, and it'll make a lot more sense to you. And then you can come and listen to this episode afterwards. So in today's episode, we are going to add to what we discussed in episode 2 and give you tips on developing an action plan for 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, folks, if you didn't hear episode number 1, the average time length for each of the episodes that Emily and I did, we tracked it through 2024, is 30 minutes and 31 seconds. So if you did not listen to episode number 2, this one here is going to make a whole lot more sense if you do go back and listen to that. One of the quotes that I had in the last chapter of my book is from novelist Anthony Trollope. And he said, quote, "There is no royal road to learning, no shortcut to the acquirement of any art," unquote. We dug into that a little bit more in episode number 2, and we talked about how people just think that everything is instantaneous. And Emily really touched on a very good point, that personal development, leadership development, does not come overnight. Yeah, you just can't take a book on leadership, stick it underneath your pillow at nighttime.
Bing.
Yeah, bing, yes. Or, listen to an audiobook or have an audiobook running while you're sleeping, and then wake up in the morning and voila. Reminds me of a friend of mine from a neighboring fire department. He was doing a career fair at one of their local high schools. They had everything set up, and he had pictures of the different rank structures from firefighter up to fire chief. And he was sharing with me how, one of the kids who was a junior in high school was talking to him about becoming a firefighter, and said, well, he's pointed up to the chief's rank and said, well, that's where I want to start. And my friend said, hey, it doesn't work that way. He said, what do you mean? He said, you come in at the bottom as a recruit, a probationary firefighter, a probie. You go through an academy, and then you have to work your way up to the rank of fire chief. It does not just come because you sign up and you think you're going to get a job. And I said, what'd the guy say? He said, I don't want nothing to do with that. It's like, yeah, okay, buddy. I wonder where that guy is, right now in life. So we're going to talk about developing your incident action plan, your development plan in the fire service, or respond to an incident, had an incident action plan. Sometimes it was up here in my head. It didn't have to be written out, but as more complex the incident became, yes, things went to paper. So what do you want December 31st of 2025 to look like for your life? What happened in 2024 that you want to change for 2025? So what I'm talking about is the end state. This is going to be your strategy, which is your overall goal. Think of it from a standpoint of an architect. Somebody wants a new building, a developer wants to put up a new building, they hire an architect, and the architect draws out that rendition of, hey, this is what this is really going to look like in the end.
Yeah.
So what do you want 2025 to look at? You can jump forward and project that.
Yeah. So we're going to ask some questions that you can ask yourself and write down. But I just want to pause before we ask these questions, that this could get really overwhelming if you've never like created a strategy plan for the year. So even just take maybe just a couple of these questions and self-reflect. And you
Yes.
don't have to figure it all out by the end of this episode or the end of January. Like this is an ongoing thing that you
Hmm.
can just continually ask yourself throughout the year. You can have a goal starting for the year and maybe just start out small. You
Hmm.
know, like don't, whatever that saying is, like you can't chew an elephant all at once. You chew it. What's the saying?
You
I'm
can't,
notoriously
you
known
can't,
for messing up
yeah, you
sayings.
can't eat an elephant
Oh,
all at once. Yeah, you eat it one bite at a time.
that's right. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a good point. I think, Emily, that's where a lot of people fail when they sit down,
Yeah.
for goal setting, for a year. Yeah, that's why I take you to the end state. What would you like to look like at the end of 2025? Then you come back. What works for me may not work for you. Same
Yeah.
thing. What works for Emily may not work for you. What I had started doing last year with my goal setting, it was just to break it down quarterly.
Hmm.
I knew what I wanted to accomplish as an overall goal for 2024, but I broke it down quarterly and then kept track. Did I hit all of them? No, no, I didn't. And, I sat down and I took a look at it. And it's like, well, sometimes, things get busy, there's interruptions. And also, things change.
Yeah.
So it's not carved in stone, folks. And I think that's another area where people get hung up on, especially those of us who are really, people of attention to detail. And, we can tend towards that perfectionist side. And that's,
Structured.
yeah, very structured. And, you could get very, very frustrated. So,
Yeah.
Emily's tips are very good about that. So, Emily, you mentioned some of the questions that people can ask themselves.
Yeah. So one of the questions is, what is your leadership philosophy?
May I interject on that one?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what is your leadership philosophy? I know a gentleman. His name's Paul Callan. He wrote the forward to my book, and Paul is a fantastic leader. I've had the pleasure of knowing him now since the end of 2013. And Paul's a retired colonel from the Marine Corps. And one year he asked me a question, and that question was, Rick, why do you believe what you do about leadership?
Mhm.
And so, with that question that Emily just asked, what's your leadership philosophy? Tie it in with that question. Why do you believe what you do about leadership? What you believe, you know, not what your boss believes or your buddies or your brothers, your sisters, or anybody believe about. What do you believe?
Yeah.
So
And then the other question is, what characteristics and qualities do good leaders possess?
yeah, with that one, hey, get out a piece of paper, you know, and divide it into two columns. Write down the good qualities that you've seen in leaders or good qualities that you would like to see in leaders. And then on the other side of that thing, write down the bad qualities as well. And when I've seen this exercise conducted, whether it be in a group or if I've been working with somebody, uh, it's interesting to see which column is going to be longer than the other. But I
Mm,
will say, whatever you're putting in that column of bad qualities, if you're doing any of them, hey, it's time to change that.
yeah. And so then what type of leadership training have you attended?
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of people aren't doing leadership training, folks. And for those of you in the fire service, wow, there's some departments out there that are doing a very good job, but there's a lot that are not
Mhm.
doing a good job. In December of 2024, I was out of state doing a training with a relatively large fire department, and they're not doing anything, with leadership training. So it
Mhm.
all falls back on the individuals. And the department that I was at here in Loveland, Colorado for a number of years, I came on board. I've had a 37-year career in the fire service and nearly 30, just shy a couple months with Loveland Fire Rescue. And from the time that I came on Loveland in 1990, all the way up until January of 2009, there was no leadership training in the fire department. It was all up to me and what I was doing. It changed in January 2009 when we got a new fire chief by the name of Randy Morawski, and he saw that gap, that lack of leadership training. So, yeah, We might be in 2025, but there's a lot of fire departments, police departments, EMS agencies, hospitals, churches, corporations,
Mhm.
private businesses that are not doing it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then what leadership books and or articles have you read?
Yeah, hey, I mentioned the last episode. I know there's a lot of men that do not like to read. It's like, oh yeah, I don't want to read. Well, there's audiobooks. Yeah, my
Mm-hmm.
book, The Furnace of Leadership Development, is also in an audiobook. And you may have heard this saying that leaders are readers.
Yeah.
So, and then the next question would be, are you associating with credible leaders? Years back, when I was going to a church in Englewood, Colorado, the pastor, his name was Bill Smith, said, "Hey, you can't smell like a rose and run with a skunk." Yeah, and you may have heard something else, and this one pops up several times a year, is show me the 5 people that you associate with, and I'll know all about your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So who are you associating with? Who are you running with? Do you have a mentor or a coach? And there's a difference between the two, folks. A mentor is someone who, comes alongside of you or you seek out on your own, and they are guiding you and they are giving you tips. My rank as a battalion chief, when I got promoted to battalion chief, I sat down with one of our former fire chiefs. His name was Dick Miner, and Dick has passed on here within the past 2 years. But that man had spent time with me as I was coming up through the ranks. And then after he retired from our department, and when I got promoted to battalion chief, I called him up and I said, "Hey, I'd like to sit down with you and learn what I need to know to become a good battalion chief." Because there's things that I did not know, even though I had observed or I had read, there's things that I did not know. So, Chief Miner, he mentored me from that
Mm-hmm.
aspect. On the other hand, a coach, a personal coach, business coach, leadership coach is asking you questions. When I coach somebody, I ask them questions to draw out the answer from them. So that's different than those of you who've been involved in sports. That the coaching concept is completely different. And then ask yourself the question, what gaps exist in your leadership development? And what characteristics and qualities you need to improve on to be a better leader? Again, that's where the mentor, the coach, or trusted advisor, seek out people who have been down the road.
Yeah.
If you're 20 years old and you're seeking out, another 20-year-old to mentor you, or to coach you, or to advise you, you ought to check up on that. But that other 20-year-old could be a very trusted friend who could see something in your life that is a blind spot for you, and they can tell you about that. So make sure you know who it is. So then, those next step in developing your tactics to achieve that overall goal or strategy.
So that's going to explain how it's going to be done.
That's right. Tactics are how it is done. Your strategy is your overall goal. And then the tactics are those steps you're going to take to achieve the overall goal or your smaller goals that you have established.
Yeah. So in Matthew 7:24 through 27, Jesus spoke of the wise man who built his house on the rock and the foolish man who built his house on the sand. So I want to ask our listeners, which would you prefer? Do you want to build it on the rock or on the sand?
Yeah, rocker on the sand. And interestingly enough, earlier this morning, Emily, I saw video that came out of Santa Cruz, California. And the day that we are recording this, everybody, is December 26, 2024. So I saw a video that occurred out in Santa Cruz, California on Christmas Eve of 2024, when the National Weather Service had issued a high surf warning for the areas north of San Francisco, south down to the Monterey Bay area. Well, some pretty hefty waves came ashore in Santa Cruz and really wiped out a lot of boats in the marina, and even took out a pier, and there was a restaurant building at the end of it, and saw the video of it floating around the Pacific Ocean, and ultimately it washed ashore.
Mm.
And so, yeah, was on a pier and put into the ground, but very unstable. Hey, you go up the coast a little bit further to San Francisco, then the soils up there when they have an earthquake is subject to a motion called liquefaction, to where the soils turn into like a liquid. That's why if you go back and you look at the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake that occurred up there when the Cypress Freeway collapsed and then over in San Francisco buildings collapsed, is that liquefaction that is taking place. So yeah, Emily, when you say, hey, where do you want your house built? On a rock
Yeah.
or on the sand? It's like our friends were describing to us on Christmas Eve the other night. Their sister and brother-in-law has a bed and breakfast in Connecticut, and they said their house is built on a rock. They said it's not going anyplace. So hey, it's your choice. It's your choice, folks. So as we're talking about this building on a rock or on sand is in my book under foundational principles of leadership on page 170. I've got 7 items listed here that come out of the book of Proverbs that is a good place for all of us to start. Number 1, fear of the Lord. Number 2, knowledge. Number 3, instruction. Number 4, understanding. Number 5, learning. Number 6, discretion. Number 7, wisdom. They all came out of the book of Proverbs. And if you don't read the Bible, well, I'd highly encourage you to do that. And if you are a believer in Jesus Christ and you read the Bible, whip out your concordance or a good place to start. You can look up these words, blueletterbible.org. That can help you out. So when you're developing your action plan for 2025, as we mentioned earlier, you can break it down,
Mhm.
into a quarterly basis. But you pull all these things together. Emily said, you don't have to do it all at once. It may come all at one time. But ask yourself, hey, what are you going to do for 2025? What seminars, conferences, courses, classes are you going to attend? Granted, for a lot of you listening, you may be hamstringed because of a organizational budget.
Yeah.
But this is where commitment and dedication comes into play. What are you willing to pay yourself, to improve that your agency won't? Hey, what books are you going to read or listen to? Magazines, so forth like that. I asked the question before, what's the credible leaders you're hanging around? Which ones are you going to seek out? Who are you going to have mentor and coach you in 2025? So, Emily, you had brought up something here earlier as we were talking about this. And why don't you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, as some people are goal oriented and they do really good with like a checklist of like writing down what their goals are going to be for the year, what they want to attain. But there's other ways to do it where you can just pick one word for the year.
Right. And folks, I'll show you this book for those of you who are watching on YouTube. One word that will change your life. One of the authors is Jimmy Page, and I've had the opportunity to hear him speak a couple different times. But what is on the inside fly here says each year resolutions are rarely kept and goals are easily forgotten. Episode number 2, I'd seen statistics earlier today, December 26th, that only 9% of the people keep New Year's resolutions, meaning 91% don't.
Yeah.
Don't. Yeah. So he says each year resolutions are rarely kept and goals are easily forgotten. But one word sticks. By living a single word that embodies the essence of your life at this moment, you'll find renewed purpose and meaning throughout the year.
Yeah.
And listening to Jimmy speak a couple of different times, he and his co-authors, they've gone out and they've helped organizations, college football teams. And so this is not just some crazy, wacky, new age thing that they are talking about. It is something that is bona fide.
Yeah.
Emily, for 2025, do you have a one word that you've chosen?
Yeah, I was gonna say I personally like picking a word because goals can sometimes be very overwhelming to me. My life is very unpredictable. And so it can be really hard to attain to those goals. But when you pick a word, it's really just embodying like who you want to be in the year and like growing and growth. So
Mhm.
the word that I am mulling over is flourish. I
Flourish.
want to be able to flourish in my life, in my business, and as well as in my personal relationships this year.
Oh, that's great. And last year, I settled on a verse, not necessarily just one word. And for
Yeah.
2024, it was Psalm 37:3. Trust in the Lord and do good.
Mm.
Dwell in the land and feed on his face faithfulness. Excuse me, getting a little tongue tied there. This year for 2025, I'm bumping down to Psalm 37, verse 7. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. And,
That's a good
for
one.
me to pick that one, that's a follow on to verse 3, trust in the Lord. And it's that rest and wait patiently. And
Yeah.
folks, sometimes in my life, I am not a very patient individual. I have a business, Fire Officer Leadership Academy, and building a business takes work. Emily knows.
Yeah.
She's got a business called Emily's Delights where she makes cake pops. It takes work to build a basin, a business.
Yeah.
And it takes patience
Yeah.
to build a business. And many, many times I don't, and I need to rest more in the Lord. So, as Emily's saying, pull all these things together. One word works for Emily, one word works for a lot of other people. Do what works for you.
Yep.
You could spend an awful lot of money on planners and journals and goal setting books and seminars and go to webinars. I sat in on a webinar in mid-December on goal setting. And at the end of it, uh, you had to listen till the end to be able to have access to the PDF. And at the end of it, it's like, well, for me, the guy didn't say anything that I didn't already know. And the PDF that he had, frankly, I found it worthless. It was worthless. I
Mm.
use a Franklin planner, and that is really helpful for me to stay on track. And so the emphasis that I'm making there is do what works for you.
Yeah, and your word or your goals or whatever you decide to do may change halfway through the year too, depending on like what season of life you're in
Yeah,
halfway.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so taking these steps does mean though that you are willing to place yourself in the
Mhm.
heat of the
Yes.
furnace. So in your book, Dad, you have I don't know what pages these are. I don't know if this is still taken from the chapter
I
or
yeah,
just
I I
random
I took
places.
them from that last chapter in the book that we're referring to.
Okay, so we're going to highlight some points then from that chapter. The quote, we must experience the heat of the furnace in order to be pliable and molded. However, the temperature must be just right, or we will either melt from the heat or shatter in the cold.
Oh, let me inject if I may. If
Absolutely.
you don't know what that one means, we don't have the time to go over it. Go back and listen to
Yeah.
episode 2 if you haven't listened to it.
Yep. And then another highlight from that chapter is the leader who fails to personally develop will fail to develop other people.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then I think we've hit this one, but we're going to repeat it again. Leadership is an art requiring time, effort, and hard work on our part.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's scientific principles that are attached to human behavior, human factors, so forth like that. But leadership is an art. And
Hmm.
just as in any other art, it takes time to development. So listen, hey folks, I've been mentoring and coaching people for an awful long time. If you'd like to learn more about how I can help you with that, my website and contact information is in the show notes, and I encourage you to reach out. So with that, Emily, that's a wrap
Yeah.
for the episode number 3. Um, Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. If you found this episode to be useful, please like, subscribe, and share. And then also, as I mentioned, you'll see my website in the show notes. You can link them there, and you'll find a link to my blog, which posts every Monday morning. And then I repost it on LinkedIn on Wednesday morning. So Emily, do you have any final words as we wrap this one up?
I don't. Just thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Okay, yes. Echoing Emily's words there. Thank you, everybody, for listening to us. We appreciate it, and we appreciate the feedback that you provide. So until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.